there,
Mm-hmm.
and an elderly lady whose Mom Durham, whose husband worked on the crew. So they all was a pretty good crew.
Okay.
And Judy was born without any complications and a beautiful baby.
Wow, that's great. That's interesting.
Then Aunt Ethel came and stayed a week or so with me.
Well, as far as other entertaining stories to tell, you've told us about cooking crawdads, and when you were young, that was your seafood, and I want you to tell your future generations about that too.
Well, this happened at Quasada. It seems so much happened at Quasada. Remember, I was in 7th grade. I left Crummell at 6th
Mhm.
grade, out to Quasada at 7th grade, and I spent from 7th grade until I got married living at Quasada.
Okay.
But when we were kids,
Mm-hmm.
there were 5 of us on that farm. All the older ones were married and gone.
Mm-hmm.
So one day, they're gonna show me how to cook crawfish.
Mm-hmm.
We went to the creek, and the older ones seined those little boogers up in a seine,
Yeah.
and we had a coffee can,
Mm-hmm.
and of course they had already made the fire,
Mhm.
and of course we weren't alone. There were other kids there too.
Really?
Besides,
Okay.
of course, anytime one bunch of kids starts together to do something, the whole bunch was there.
Mm-hmm.
And so I thought, what are they doing? And I'm one of the younger ones.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, they got all those little
Cry.
crawling things and dumped them into that boiling water.
Uh-huh.
And of course, the older ones knew how to do it, so they cooked them about a minute, and we had all the good stuff. The kids had brought probably boiled eggs and everything else,
Mhm.
because we had it on the farm, So we had a blast. Those things were cooked and nothing flat, and out they came, and they showed us how to crack them and eat them. So I was initiated into the crawfish family.
You still
And-
love seafood, don't you?
Oh yeah, I love it, and those things were good. They still are. And you see them doing it in Louisiana, they didn't have a thing on us. Where they just had more crawfish.
So that was Okie seafood.
Okay, Quasada crawdads.
Speaking of your sister, Lily, she was my favorite great aunt, and also her daughter, Jan. I just loved her to death. And there was a story about grubworm
Yeah.
that I wanted you to share.
Which do you want, Lily or Jan?
Well, let's do Lily, and then
And then we'll think about Jan. But
Okay.
we may have to stop. Lily and I were just barely teenagers when we moved to this farm. And it was a neat farm. The house was little, but we had a huge barn and a good farm for Dad, and the boys could make a good living there. But one day, Mama and Dad left Lily and I there with plenty of chores to keep us busy. So we were doing whatever we were supposed to be doing, and of course, pretty soon our brickering got into a fight, and we were fighting, and I picked up a cat and I threw it at her just as she went through the door. And in those little houses, man, those doors could fasten. And that thing fastened, and that cat was screaming his head out. But he was he was caught by the door.
Caught by the tail in the door.
By the tail in the door. But thank God he was on Lily's side.
He's on Lily's
and
side.
the tail was on my side, and it didn't cut the tail off. He was just hanging there.
Oh no.
So man, I had to walk over to the door, open it, and let that screaming cat out on the world to go out and finally get rid of that cat. So we had, that tail, and we had a bobtail cat
Oh my gosh.
there. And I
Okay.
need to stop there.
Okay.
I'll
Well-
tell you about Jan next time.
Okay. Okay. Well, we're wrapping up
You
our.
want that about Jan?
No, not now.
Okay.
We're wrapping up our first interview with Grandma right now. I just want to ask you one final question for this first interview. Who did you marry?
Oh, only one person. Van Patrick Henry Roberts. And of course, Patrick Henry wasn't really part of his name. But Van Roberts, and he was from Ada, Oklahoma.
Okay.
Back home. Ada, Oklahoma.
Okay, well, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go ahead and read a short excerpt from his side of the family so that our family can get an idea of that side of the family. It's the Stanfords, and the Stanfords, that's where the Roberts family came from. So I will read a short excerpt, and then we'll go on to our next interview.
And next time, I will connect this with my finishing school at Cromwell and how I met Van.
Okay, sounds good. The picture that you just viewed is Susie Mae Stanford, and she is my great-grandmother. She is the mother of Van Roberts, my grandfather, and I'm going to be reading stories or excerpts out of this book. It's a genealogy book written by Ellis Woodrum. I think he's a cousin of ours. But it's the Isaac Franklin Stanford and Ella Florence Murphy family. This is chapter 5, and this is the story, or one of the stories or descriptions of Susie Mae Stanford and Chessie Cleveland Roberts family. Susie Mae Stanford was the fourth child and second daughter of Isaac Franklin Stanford and Ella Florence Murphy. She was born on August 20th, 1881 in Lampasas County, Texas. She married Chessie Cleveland Roberts on December 6, 1903 at Ada, Pontotoc County, Oklahoma. She and Chess had 9 children, 5 boys and 4 girls, all of whom lived to adulthood and married. Chess was a farmer and politician. At the time of his death from a heart attack in 1937, he was county commissioner for Pontotoc County. He and Sue, with their children, lived on a farm several miles from Ada. Their home was on a hill, and when Chess and Sue would go to Oklahoma City on business. I am told that when Chess would come home, the children would be watching for him. It would usually be after dark, and when he would come over a rise several miles from home, the kids could always recognize his car and be ready for him when he arrived. He was a very dynamic and hardy individual and well liked by everyone. It is probable he would have risen far in state politics had it not been for his untimely death. Following Chess' death when her youngest was 11 years old, Sue moved into Ada, where she lived until her death on December 12, 1961. She survived her husband by over 24 years. I am told that her home was warm and friendly, and she was a delight to be around. She had a good sense of humor and was easy to talk to. Chess and Sue's descendants are many. There are farmers, lawyers, teachers, engineers, and many other professionals. And I want to mention that Susie Mae Stanford is where we get our Native American blood, and it's very obvious by her picture that she was part Native American. Before I cover the genealogy of our great-great-grandparents, I want to read this story that my grandmother that we're interviewing, Annie Vedas Hopper Roberts, wrote that is included in the genealogy. This is called The Cowboy Marries His Lady, and this is Susie Mae Roberts, the lady mentioned in the story. In May 1932, I first met the Chessie C. Roberts family. I was living with my sister, Mrs. R.V. R. Self Ollie, at Colbert School, 3 miles north of Ada, Oklahoma, so that I could attend summer school at East Central Teachers College. At a community party that summer, I met a tall, handsome man, Van Roberts, then his family, who lived about a quarter mile east of our house. Chessie, Cece, or Chess, Roberts was county commissioner of Pontotoc County at the time. He and his wife Susie made many trips to Oklahoma City for political meetings. This was a very busy, happy time. Van and I felt quite privileged when his dad allowed us to drive his new Chevy on special dates. During those years, Chessie and Susie had three small children in grade school, Lloyd, Ivelita, and Juanita. In addition, there were 2 grown sons at home, Van and Curtis, and 1 daughter, Lena. As a housewife during those years and with a large family without the many conveniences of our lives today, Susie was very busy with days filled with things to do. In addition, Chess had a heart condition, and Susie knew his diet was critical. She planned Chess meals and diet with great care and deliberation throughout this long period, with loving care and concern for her husband, the father of their children. In observing her, I learned a great many valuable things about preparing food, which were to stand me in good stead later in my life. Van began working for Seismograph Service Company, SSC, in 1933. We were married in 1936, and I went to join him in Hobbs, New Mexico in May 1937. On June 18, 1937, Chessie had a massive heart attack and passed away. In a new 1937 Ford Coupe, we drove all night and on those beautiful highways through Texas and western Oklahoma with very little traffic. We flew and arrived home the next morning. Upon our arrival, we experienced the first sad occasion in our life together. In the fall of 1937, Susie sold the farm animals and equipment and moved into Ada. There she was to live the remainder of her lifetime. Van and I traveled with SSC during the next 7 years, while his mother lived in Ada. There she was to live the remainder of her lifetime. Van and I traveled with SSC during the next 7 years, while his mother lived in Ada, keeping a home for 3 teenagers, and was active in the First Baptist Church. Van and I lived in Shawnee, Oklahoma from 1943 through 1951. And we were able to be with Mom often. It's difficult for me to write Susie since she was always Mrs. Roberts or Mom to me. We talked of so many things. I felt that she loved me, and I know I truly loved her. She used to tell stories as I manicured her nails when she was no longer able to do so herself. One of my favorites was about her getting married. It seems that she and Cece were ready to get married, so they drove to the Reverend Williams' house in a buggy. Chessie went inside, brought the preacher outside, and stood there by the buggy as the minister performed the marriage ceremony. The young cowboy had finally won the rancher's daughter. By the by, she never allowed me to polish her nails, even though I teased and coaxed. On occasion, perhaps a little colorless polish only. Mom also told me that Chessie came to her father as a boy of 14 or 15 years of age and grew up there on the Stanford Ranch. That is where they fell in love. You see, Isaac's influence was very strong in this part of the Roberts clan. Van has notes in our family Bible of this fact. that Ike had raised Chessie. It has been my pleasure to share with you a few memories of the many I have of our wonderful family, of which I am so very proud to be a member. From our Bible written by Van, grandmother has Ike Stanford, born in Mississippi, Sarah Ella Murphy, born Alabama, from Mississippi to Texas. Ike Stanford raised C.C. Roberts. C.C. and Susie Mae Stanford married at Marsden, Oklahoma, by Reverend Williams at Williams Farm. C.C. Roberts was born February 25, 1885, and died June 18, 1937. Susie Mae Stanford Roberts was born on August 20th, 1881, and died December 12, 1961. Both are buried in the Ada Cemetery.
You know, I forgot that was in there.
This is the furthest back that we are going to go in the genealogy, and this is actually chapter 1 of the Isaac Franklin Stanford and Ella Florence Murphy family genealogy book. So even if we wanted to go further back, we'd have to do our own research. This is the Reverend Isaac Franklin Stanford and Ella Florence Murphy story. Isaac Franklin Stanford was the son of James Noah Stanford and Elizabeth Holden. He was from Marlin County, Mississippi, and moved to Texas shortly after the Civil War. For the most detailed account I have of him, it says see a sketch provided in the notes section, which we won't go into. He had one brother named Green, and that was spelled Greene, and 6 sisters. Nothing is known of the paternal side of his family, but the maternal great-grandfather was a Captain Bond, B-O-N. It is thought that Captain Bond was a Frenchman who immigrated to the Mississippi sometime prior to the Revolutionary War and labored as a missionary to the Indians. He married a Native American lady from either the Chickasaw or Choctaw Nation, and nothing else is known of him. In 1911 or 1912, Molly Stanford Reynolds traveled to Mississippi to lay claim to the family's Indian rights. None were awarded by the U.S. government since the family had not been forced to move west on the Indian March. Ella Florence Murphy was the youngest child and 4th daughter of James Murphy and Sarah Moy. She had 4 brothers and 3 sisters and was also from Marion County, Mississippi. Ella's father died shortly before birth. It is believed that all of her family, led by her mother, moved to Texas shortly after the Civil War, moving first to the Houston area, then to the Lampasas area of Texas, and finally settling in the Ardmore area of Oklahoma Indian Territory. Ella was 10 years younger than her husband and survived him by more than 20 years. A great many of the first cousins in the family today have very clear memories of her. She is said to have been a very tiny lady, never weighing more than 75 pounds, with an extremely pleasant personality. She didn't like to be waited on, even in her old age, and pretty well took care of herself, although she did live with her sons and daughters following the death of Isaac. She was very short, being able to easily stand under the outstretched arms of her husband. My mother can remember her lying on the floor, daring her grandchildren to pull out her gray hair. My mother says she doesn't ever remember being able to find one. Ella's mother, Sarah, lived with the Reverend Ike and Ella in her old age and moved to Indian Territory with them in the late 1890s, and then to Portales, New Mexico with them, where she died in 1906. The Reverend Ike was a very large, friendly man, standing well over 6 foot and probably weighing about 240 pounds in his prime, although there was not an ounce of fat on him. Firm rather than stern, he ruled his family as a patriarch, setting an example both by word and deed for his children and grandchildren. He gained the confidence of his daughters and sons-in-law, and earned their respect. He suffered a stroke in 1909, following which he was unable to speak. His daughter Alice and her husband, Bud Ammons, went to Portales, New Mexico, and brought him to their home at Vernon, Texas, where he lived the last years of his life, passing away in 1913. I can remember my grandfather, Bud Ammons, talking about the influence he had over his family. He said that grown married sons and daughters would write to him for advice and directions, which they would usually take. Although a minister, Reverend Isaac was not sanctimonious, but rather radiated the pure love of Christ. Okay, we're back with Grandma. Grandma, it looks like you have a new outfit.
Special present from you and Charlie. Isn't it pretty?
It's beautiful. Okay, we have some more questions for you.
Oh, I expected that.
Okay. The first question we have is, how did you meet my grandfather, Van Roberts?
I met Van at a community party at a place called Colbert, which is 3 miles north of Ada. I lived there with my sister, Ollie, and went to college. So that summer we had lots of kid parties. And when I went to this particular party, Van was there. But I had never met him, and we'd never been introduced. But at those kind of parties, young people migrate to the ones they like and so forth. And that's where I met Van, and I thought he was very handsome, and we had a wonderful time. And it went on from there for the rest of our courtship.
Well, that sounds like love at first sight.
No, it wasn't love at first sight, not that way. You meet somebody in a crowd and you like them, or
Mm-hmm.
no, I don't. I don't believe in love at first sight. I think love is a growing thing.
Well, when you first met Grandpa, did you have any kind of intuition or any kind of sense, or?
I was across the room. We were outside. It was an outside party.
Mm-hmm.
I was across the group of people from Van, and I looked across, and I started at the feet
Yeah.
and went up.
Uh-huh.
He had on wonderful shoes and the best looking pair of brown slacks I've ever seen.
Oh, okay.
And I kept going, and I liked what I saw, and I thought he was very handsome, and he was tall. And that was the kind of men I liked at that time. And so we got along fine at the party, and he walked me home.
Oh, wow.
Which was all across the schoolyard. But we...
Quite a distance, huh?
Quite a distance. But we had a really good time, and we got along famously. And but the courtship lasted for almost 5 years.
Did you mention what year this was?
I didn't mention it, but it was 1932.
1932.
The summer of 1932. I graduated from high school and went right into summer school.
Okay.
And I really think it's a wonderful thing for a kid to do.
Really?
Because now summer school is different.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, an 18-year-old has never been on campus.
Mm-hmm.
So we learned the campus, and we learned where the rooms were, and
Right.
a lot about the teachers. And so summer school in Ada then was kind of neat anyway.
Mm-hmm.
So The reason I think it was such a wonderful thing. Then you come back in September. You're there 8 weeks. We were, and then school starts in September, and you know who you want to enroll with,
Mhm.
and you know more about counting hours and what you're working for.
Mm-hmm.
And it was wonderful in our experience.
Yeah, I know nowadays they have counselors that help you with that, but I'm sure that sounds like something I would have liked to have done my first year of school.
Right? Kids don't have anything to do, and I don't believe they should go off and play for 6 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
They've forgotten all their how to study and everything else.
Right.
And so we took it pretty seriously. But I went to college because I wanted a job
Mm-hmm.
other than washing dishes.
Right. Well, and I have another question here. Now, we've talked about Reverend Isaac before,
Mm-hmm. Jesse.
raising Grandpa's dad, Chessie, and I want to be clear about that because Reverend Isaac, his natural daughter was Susie May,
Yes.
Susie May Stanford.
Mhm.
So Reverend Isaac Stanford raised Chessie Roberts, and I wanted to ask you why that happened.
The stories that were handed down to me when Chessie was about 12 or 14.
Mm-hmm.
He didn't. His dad was not a strong family man, and I don't know whether that family disbanded or what. But Chessie,
Alcoholic or
no, there was none of that. I don't even
you don't know the
any
particulars?
I don't know any stories of Chessie's dad's family.
They just didn't
meet-
talk about it?
Well, I met him, and I liked the old man
Oh,
later in life,
I see.
much later.
Hmm.
But when Chessie was 14
Mm-hmm.
or so,
Mm-hmm.
he now whether he wanted to be a cowboy or whether he wanted just to do this on his own, I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
But Chessie migrated into the Stanford Ranch, and
Okay.
at that time it was a ranch.
Mm-hmm.
So they took him as a stray kid and put him to work.
I
And
see.
he worked the
Mhm.
rest of his life on that ranch.
Didn't his brother do the same thing? Didn't Chessie's brother work on the ranch? That's what I thought. Am I
No.
wrong?
No,
Okay.
Chessie, I never knew that Chessie had a brother.
Okay.
I never knew anything about Chessie's mother
Mm-hmm.
or family other than the old man because later in life.
I
Okay.
see.
So you want to know, so Stanford raised Chessie.
Okay.
I don't know about Chessie's schooling from then on. He probably, knowing the history of Stanford, he probably put him in school too.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, now there were years there from when Chessie was 14 until they were grown, and he was almost Susie's age, but I think Susie was about a year or so older than Chessie.
Okay.
Well, he grew up, and he was a very intelligent person,
Mm-hmm.
and he loved what he saw on that Stanford Ranch.
Mm-hmm.
I know, he never told me that, but I know that.